Okay, so after that bombshell, going into the next segment, Desantis administration rejecting proposed AP African American Studies class. We're going to have our good friend BB take us into this one.
So, in our second segment, just like Richard said, we're going to be traveling down to 1950. I'm hearing from my producers it's actually Florida in 2023. Hard to tell the difference, my bad. So anyway, in this story from CNN, as reported by Steve Conterno, the DeSantis administration has rejected a proposed AP African American Studies class in Florida high schools. And I, for one, am shocked. I kind of want to pass it to somebody because I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here because DeSantis he's a button for me. So, like, just take away from any of the real world implications of this bullshit, and let's just talk about what this actually is. Everything that has been done by this administration regarding education up until this point, like all the anti-LGBTQ plus, all the anti-black, all the anti-woke, a term that his legal team couldn't actually define while they were in court, being sued by a teacher that they fired for being too woke. Shock. All of this is just campaigning. That's the state of this backwards ass country that we are in right now. Whatever can be done to be the most deplorable, that's how you win. Be the most deplorable person. That's how you win. And DeSantis has spent the last few years trying to out Trump, and he seems to be doing a pretty good job of it right now. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on over to let's go with Phoebe because I wanna hear a rant.
Well, if you want to rant, here we go again. Fear-mongering, whining of jingoism, fragile white person syndrome rolled into one in Florida. We hardly need you at this point, Florida, to be less of a parody of yourself. But this is the absurd lunacy that Florida has rolled itself into now. I mean, it's clear, just like CRT, critical race theory, people coming out and said their hair on fire. I have no idea what they're setting their hair on fire about. I mean, this course, as it currently stands, according to the article, is looking to be offered in as limited a setting as 60 educational establishments across the United States, none of which are Florida. I repeat, none of which are Florida. So Florida is planning on banning something that's not happening in Florida. Get your head around that for a second. That's like, let's follow imaginary street signs. Because I think it should be this. I mean, Florida. I have something that I'm going to ask you now. Can you please just check that you're still attached to the rest of the United States? Can you just check that Georgia is still, north of you? And, like Alabama and, Louisiana, they're still there. Can you just check that you haven't floated off into the middle of the ocean and you're just, making up nonsense as you go along? Because this is another one of your amazing CRT, fear-mongering, racism, jingoistic nonsenses of pure whole cloth that you have decided to create. And Ben, take me off the peninsula before I run into the Gulf of Mexico, please.
Yeah, so this whole thing is about an AP course in the U.S. about African-American history, but it's also about African-American culture, literature, science, politics, geography, all of the above. And for people who don't know, these AP classes it's a college credit class in high school, and they're optional. They are not required for anybody. You opt into the class. Oftentimes they offer another history class for you to take at the same time. Like if you didn't want to do the AP class, you do whatever everybody else is taking. And so we have AP European history, we have AP US history, we have all these other classes, but they're not at all required. So the fact that DeSantis is saying, well, we're just going to ban anybody from taking this class because I don't like what's being taught. It's like, he's not coming up against, I'm requiring everybody to take this class even. It's an optional class about a subculture of the US. And his excuse is that he doesn't want to put theory into the curriculum. But the problem is they're using this term theory, the colloquial term, instead of the actual sociological definition, which is still a bit more loose than how it's used in physical science to mean like basically like a law of science. It's still a bit more loose, but he's trying to say that theory is something that has not been evidence-based or validated. But when we say theory in sociology, that is what we mean. We mean that it is evidence-based, it is demonstrable. This is what we've seen throughout culture and throughout history. So he's off definitionally for that, but the tactics that he's using are the same that we've seen all throughout history, with slavery, Jim Crow laws, and modern-day segregation. And it perpetuates the separate but equal message that you can talk about this part of our community on your own time. We don't need to cover that in our class because we're only going to talk about the victors. And the victors in this case are the white Americans. The European Americans are the only ones that matter here. So, I mean, I have more points I'll get into later, but I'm curious about anyone else's thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think you've made some very, very good points there. I think that the actual department that sent this letter was the Florida. I've got to compose myself before I say this. The Florida Department of Education Office of Articulation, and I'm not going to lie, that sounds like a made-up department from a Monty Python sketch.
What is this? The Department of Whimsy and Caprice?
It is very much. There's a certain skit on Monty Python, and they kind of got everybody's letters around the room because they're that important, and it reminds me of that very much. So this name, the Florida Department of Education Office of Articulation. They said the course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. And in the future, should College Board be willing to come back to the table with lawful, historically accurate content, they will always be willing to reopen the discussion. This is from people. Let's point out, they're questioning history. This is from people who believe in a God based on a dusty old book with questionable historical accuracy. Of course, they didn't specifically say what was wrong with the course. They're not going to, are they? Because there's nothing they can actually pinpoint. Instead, going for that it leaves large ambiguous gaps and can be filled with additional ideological material, which we will not allow. So is this objection because it lacks historical accurate content, which is a very specific claim, or because it does address historically accurate content, which we know from previous efforts by Desantis is not allowed in Florida if it contradicts the idealized whitewashed version of American history, more palatable to certain political ears? Phoebe.
All right. I'll let y'all go. Let me get ready. All right. So let's talk about the specific issue because I went on about the campaign and everything. And what is no surprise to anybody at all, this move is explicitly racist. And I know somebody watching this is going to say, come on, everything can't be racist. To which I say, it can if it's fucking racist. How do we know it's racist? Let's look at the language in their statement Richard just read. The statement from the administration stated this course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. Now, what stands out for me is the significantly lacks educational value. It's the lack for me, as the kids say. Why does that stand out, you may ask? Because you know what does have great educational value according to Florida? AP European history, fucking shock. AP art history, AP Japanese language and culture, AP German language and culture, AP Italian language and culture, AP Spanish language and culture. So pretty much everybody except African Americans is what I'm saying. Now, am I saying that these subjects have no educational value? Of course not. They all have value. What I'm saying is, just like in the case of me screaming Black Lives Matter for the last few years, I'm not saying that only Black Lives Matter. I'm saying that our lives matter too. Our lives, our culture, And our history matters too. For those that feel like they're tired of hearing about this because, okay, everybody gets it now, we can move on, we're all aware. This story is just one more reminder that we're not that far. Like, we have not come that far. If politicians can continue to carry out racially biased policies and be rewarded for it, we're obviously not living in the post-racial utopia that some seem to envision. Obama becoming president has become America's I can't be racist, I have a black friend, and I'm just not cool with that shit. So saying that only CRT, which is what this administration labels anything regarding black history, lacks educational value, it's an obvious dog whistle to his racist base and the people that like him. Like, they've cultivated this base of just racist, hateful people. And let me say again for the people in the back, African American history is American history. CRT is just American history without the rose-colored glasses and the patriotic propaganda. Real history should be a part of every school's curriculum. The further we run from our history, the further we remain from actual progress. And I will end with this because that was a pretty good rant. I feel good about that rant. So I will end with this. Since so many on the right like quoting MLK, I'm going to throw in a quote from one of his books. This is from his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? MLK says, whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe that they have so little to learn. That's the crux of all this to me. Historically, right-wing figures have always railed against education. They call anybody with an education an elitist. They try to prop up that fake image of the rugged individual with just the sense that God gave them, right? Just good old boy. They try to amp that up. And they do this because they know that when their children are exposed to facts, actual education, real history, the bullshit becomes more obvious that it's bullshit. Their entire ideology is relying on ignorance. Math is important, science is critical, and so is history. Please don't let them erase it. End rant, off my soapbox.
So I feel like I should, play back in my head somebody unfurling a long and large parchment in a large building, one of 9 people, and reading aloud in a reed-thin voice, where he decreed that as a result of the case before him, no black man was entitled to be the same as any white man, and that no black man was able to free themselves from the bondage of slavery. And this man thought what he was doing was uniting America. Instead, what he did was he caused the Civil War. That man was the 7th Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America, Roger B. Taney. And what did he do? He began the Civil War. So will that be something that Mr. Desantis would like to see taught? That's historically accurate. That's of educational value. And I leave you with that. The very first page of the United States Constitution says, the electors and representatives shall be apportioned among the free states, and all free men shall be counted, and 3/5 of all others shall be counted. And I shall leave it there.
Ben.
Yeah. My last comments to leave you all with on this topic is this AP class dangerous for DeSantis's agenda? Absolutely. Absolutely, this class is dangerous to him because studying the history and culture of the African American community humanizes this community. And it's very difficult for young people that are learning this content, especially with what we're already seeing with Gen Z and the massive amount of activism that they're getting involved in, to go along with perpetuating this inequality and inequity when you see the others as human. So take with that what you will.
Yeah, I think one of the things in this article, and you can read it below, as we've said earlier on in the show, all the articles are there to read below. Lisa Hill, who was one of the teachers who was piloting this new course, seemed absolutely puzzled by this. And she said, "I must tell you for sure, we don't have a political agenda." Hill told CNN when reached by phone on the Thursday before this article was written, "It is not a course of indoctrination. My philosophy of education is you learn and discuss and debate so you get a better understanding of what's presented to you." She said, "We teach facts. We're not delving into some wayward theory." I think she's answered her own query. Having a philosophy of education when you're not indoctrinating people, where you are discussing, debating, and getting a good understanding of what is being taught, where you are teaching facts, appears to be exactly what Desantis is objecting to. Outside of scholarship, it seems to me that Christians in America rely on indoctrination, avoid debate, and purposefully twist what's presented to them. As an outsider looking in, it's certainly what I see in the US is the American Christians tend to access academic information from two sources, scholars and apologists. The latter, who I think a reasonable explanation of, is wannabe scholars who are incapable or unwilling to address their own bias. Again, as an outsider, it seems the political Christian right in the US are firmly in the camp of the apologist. Evidence? Facts? They don't seem to matter as long as their ideology remains intact. And this is exactly why no statements will be made about which parts of the state finds problematic, because ambiguity allows for indoctrination into ideals. If your argument is ambiguous, then there is nothing specifically to defend, and you can shift the whole focus onto the thing you're opposing, onto those who are honest enough to dot the I's and cross the T's. You've only got to watch the recent debate that I had with a Christian apologist to see this ambiguity in action. And again, in this objection, if we avoid detail, we cannot get pinned down by the specifics. Right or left, in whatever sphere you're involved in, that is a red flag. And it should be a huge red flag. And it's certainly a massive red flag in this case. Phoebe, do you want to take us out?
Again, I just want to leave you guys with, please keep in mind that this is a very, very real thing. They are really, really trying to destroy education. And just like Ben was saying when we were talking about, like, they humanize, when you learn about these cultures, it humanizes Black people. But that's why the whole anti-woke thing, it's all encompassing. They also want to rail against LGBTQ plus communities. Anybody that cis white male Christians find as others, that's what they're going to try to dehumanize. So